What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and a couple of things I wanted to address up front is one, the slight change you see here is I did set up my new desk, which is a standing desk, and I thought I would see how things looked and how things sounded if I had it in its raised standing position. I feel I can be a little more animated, not that I need to be, but either way. I also am a little more washed out as some of these lights are a little more direct on my face. Oof, that's worse. Either way, we'll see. So anyway, that being said, it's time to do the OGL 1.2 survey. Now I already filled this out kind of ahead of time, and we'll just click all the way through. I did think it's weird that towards the end there's an option to save it and come back for later, but it also logs an email address. It seems a little odd to me because it's never been a thing to thus far. But two things I did want to address up front before we dive into the survey proper is one, they actually did close the Cleric 1 D&D survey on the 20th, which is something they said they were going to do, and they actually did it. In the past, anytime they'd had a 1 D&D survey that they were going to close, they ended up extending it out a week. This one they closed on the 20th. Just thought I would mention that. And secondly, there was an OGL 1.2 FAQ that came out. I didn't really hear anybody talking about it. I didn't even realize it was a thing, but it had a couple of bits at the end that I thought might be worth looking into before we actually talk about the survey. So I'll go ahead and pull it up. Here it is on D&D Beyond. Also, I should mention, if you recall, we had that one video where we talked about the artwork that they used for like the OGL was like a counter blue card for Magic the Gathering. They since have changed the art for the article on D&D Beyond. But anyway, this is the where to find the latest information FAQs regarding the OGL 1.2. Now, nothing here is really groundbreaking as far as stuff we've already known. It goes on to talk about virtual tabletops. Does Wizards review the feedback? We have designers whose core job it is to complete, analyze, and act upon the feedback. Again, it'll be, I think we need to be they need to be clear. We need to clearly understand what feedback is being, like how it's being incorporated. And I have some thoughts about that's discussed in the survey. Is D&D Beyond planning to release a $30 subscription? No, these are rumors. I will also just point out that it does say is D&D Beyond. Does not mean that there isn't another $30 subscription coming. But for the time being, I'm going to table that and say there's nothing to consider. Although I want to point out that one D&D that we saw in the trailer, the virtual tabletop, there technically is no guarantee that that system has any integration with D&D Beyond. It seems like a no-brainer to have them integrate, but just something to consider. Is Wizards working on AI DMs? No, we are not working on AI DMs. We love our human DMs too much. If you're looking for a DM, we suggest heading to our Discord. What do you consider hateful or harmful conduct in the OGL 1.2? We'll get into this when we get into it. Hateful and harmful conduct is hard to define, and we know it's a sensitive topic. We're taking it and your input seriously. We will clarify the language around this in the next draft. That'll definitely help because that's a lot of what a lot of people have issues and concerns with, myself included. What creative efforts won't be impacted by OGL 1.2? Video content, accessories for your own content, contracted services, and non-published works, virtual tabletop content, DMs, guild content, and content published under the OGL 1.0a. I feel like a lot of this is pretty self-explanatory. Stuff you've already published is safe. DMs guild is safe, so that's fine. What should I do if I have a project in 1.0a in development? That is a good question because there are a lot of folks out there that have that. Continue developing your project under OGL 1.0a. As we get feedback on OGL 1.2, we hope that you'll see that publishing under OGL 1.2 will be suitable for your TTRPG project, hopefully better. If you think it's not, we want to know why in the survey, which is what we are going to fill out today. It's open until February 3rd, so a little over a week from now. And they have a little bit about the Creative Commons. Why does the draft why doesn't it talk about money? It says OGL 1.2 is a free license. We'll make this clearer in future revisions. There was some concerns regarding that. Basically, people saying they had something about money in the leaked 1.1, the commercial non-commercial aspect. Nothing was mentioned here. So in theory, that could be a good thing unless there's a separate document that would govern the money. And why is it being called a playtest? We are calling this a playtest draft because it is a known term in the D&D community. What we mean is we will make changes after we hear your feedback. I do feel like that's a weird choice, but this last bit is the thing I wanted to talk about the most. Will additional content be added to the Creative Commons license and to OGL 1.2? Yes. We are looking at adding previous edition content to both the Creative Commons license and OGL 1.2. We wanted to get this into your hands for feedback as soon as possible and focus on 5.1, but look for more content to be included throughout these discussions. Again, SRD 5.1 is what they're referencing there. That is what contains basically all of the 5th edition content that is allowed to be used. Now, again, if you didn't get a chance to read through it, the stuff covered in the Creative Commons license is basically game mechanics. The concept of advantage, disadvantage, ability checks, saving throws, proficiency bonus, hit dice, the concept of spellcasting, backgrounds, feats, combat, stuff like that. It doesn't actually deal with anything like races or species, classes, spells, magic items, specific monsters. So it basically has all of the stuff that you need to run it. So in theory, you could publish stuff not under the OGL 1.2 if you created nothing but original content, right? So you couldn't make a paladin subclass using without having to use the OGL 1.2 again as it stands currently. But if you wanted to make a champion, a brand new, or maybe not champion because it's a fighter subclass, but you get my point, a Justicar or something, whatever you want to call it, that is a that's not a paladin, but kind of is a duplicate for one, a new level 1 to 20 class with the concept of subclasses. You could do that, but you couldn't create an existing subclass for, or a new subclass rather, for an existing class without using the OGL 1.2, again, as things are written currently. So I'm going to just go through my feedback here. You can see it right here. I said, would I like to provide feedback? I said yes. And then they have just this open text box, which I wish I had known because they had asked targeted questions after this, and I just dumped all of my feedback in this first section. So I have several concerns, questions about OGL 1.2. I'll admit that OGL 1.2 is a step in the right direction. However, as you stated, it is still very much a draft. The deauthorization of OGL 1.0a, don't do it. Leave OGL 1.0a alone. Section 2, don't change the meaning of the word irrevocable. List the license as irrevocable, not just the content of it. For those of you who don't know, again, this was covered in my video with No Downs, aka my lawyer friend. They basically changed the terms in the OGL 1.2 of what irrevocable means. We were saying we want the license so that you can't revoke it. We want it perpetual. We want all this stuff when we want you to not be able to revoke it. So what they did was they changed the meaning of the word irrevocable in the license itself. It says irrevocable, meaning the content that content licensed under this license can never be withdrawn from the license. Essentially, they didn't say that you can't revoke the license, right? Content licensed under this license can never be withdrawn from it. So if I put out content under OGL 1.2, that can never be taken away from this license, but they can still just revoke the license entirely. Make the license, make it clear, right? Section 3, if it can be proven that Wizards of the Coast knowingly and intentionally copied your licensed work, you should be able to force them to take it down. Again, I'm paraphrasing everything here, and I'm not a lawyer, so this is not legal advice, but it does state that in Section 3, if you can basically prove that Wizards of the Coast knowingly and intentionally copied content that you put out there, you can sue them essentially to get money for damages, but they still get to keep their content, their version of your content out there. I think you should be able to, rightfully so, have them take it down. Section 6F, you've heard a ton of people talk about this. This is the morality clause, right? And it basically goes on to state that outside, in your published work, which I think the general spirit is what I say here, while I understand the spirit of this section, WotC should not be allowed to dictate what a creator does in their personal life. I also worry that WotC would not have, I also worry that WotC, would have the time and ability to moderate and enforce this morality clause. Also, there's a lot of freedom there to ban/strip the license from someone if they just rub WotC the wrong way. The concept being, if you conduct yourself in a manner that is obscene, harmful, illegal, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch of things. But if you do that in your regular life outside of your content, then they can strip the license from you. Again, I'm not giving people carte blanche to go be dicks, right? I'm not. And I understand that the concept probably was designated to prevent certain people from putting horribly derogatory and awful content into print and associating it with Dungeons and Dragons, as that does ultimately harm their brand if people see content out there that's licensed as D&D 5e content and it's just the most foul, awful stuff. I get that. That makes perfect sense to me. But what if I live in a state where something isn't illegal but is illegal somewhere else? That's part of the problem we run into, is right, there's different rules for different states, different countries, right? So potentially what could be illegal in one place could be legal somewhere else. So then if I conduct myself in a manner that they deem illegal, then I could have my license stripped away. What if I am an OnlyFans creator and I also make TTRPG content? Could that not be considered obscene? And then in such a way they can just strike it down, which is possible too, right? Maybe they decide down the road that my face is obscene and they're like, hey, we don't like you, strip that license, right? What if harassment was one? But what if I get into an exchange with somebody at a football game in good faith, ragging on somebody else or shitting on the enemy team because, it's football, we're doing whatever, but they see that and then they say, well, that was harassment. Get rid of it, right? And then again, there's always the concept of what could be considered harmful, illegal, obscene, or what have you. Currently in 2023, things may be fine, but in 2026, the world may shift their the way they consider certain things to be, or even the company at Wizards of the Coast, the leadership, the people in charge of policing this morality clause could change hands, and then what they previously was considered safe is now no longer considered safe because these new people have a different opinion of what is harmful or what have you. As you could see just from my back and forth about this different aspects here, there's a lot of stuff that gives a lot of gray area and vaguity, which is, again, if you violate any of those, they can strip the license from you. And I think that that's a very big concern. All right, moving on, we have how has your perception of the future of D&D changed compared to reading OGL 1.2? And I said it's basically the same. Now, again, we should take this with a grain of salt. When I say the same, I think nothing has changed since they leaked 1.1. Now, if you were to go back 6 months, my thoughts would be very different on Dungeons and Dragons as they are currently. I said a lot of the damage has already been done. The silence, the leaked non-draft OGL 1.1, the OGL 2.0, etc. The communications we've received now are nice and everything, but they're too little too late. To improve my perception of D&D in the future, here's what you'd need to do. Do not revoke OGL 1.0a, leave it as it stands. Whatever new OGL you develop applies to 6e/1 D&D going forward. Release critical content like base classes to Creative Commons. Be very clear and open with survey responses going forward. It needs to be explicitly clear what the fan/community's thoughts are. If you hold all the information, there's no guarantee you're actually listening. Perhaps pulling out a few key quotes from the feedback sections that support the general theme of topics you're discussing. While I'm sure this isn't likely either, separate D&D from Hasbro. Let it stand as its own company, free from the influence of corporate higher-ups. Again, I feel like almost none of that will get answered or addressed, but maybe they will. And then it kind of just goes through to say, how do you understand the following? Your understanding on a on a 1 to 5 of the different sections of the document, and then your satisfaction, which I think is important. They're gauging, like, do you understand the legalese of some of these? Do you not? And this is basically, what about the stuff covered under the Creative Commons? I said, well, it's a nice sentiment that you released what you released to Creative Commons. Most of it was game mechanics anyway, so they weren't really copyrightable by you. Anyway, so again, while it sounds nice, it isn't too much of a shift. While there are ways for content creators to continue to make content without having to agree to the OGL 1.2, it is exceedingly difficult without things like base classes, spells, monsters, etc. And that's kind of what we talked about there. Also, again, the concept of what they release to Creative Commons isn't things that they can kind of own anyway. So it seems like a big gesture to people who don't really understand it, but it's actually kind of a non-issue. Okay, notice of deauthorization. Again, leave OGL 1.0 alone. It's been stated by several people who were involved and helped pen the original OGL that it was not meant to be revoked, even though it was not stated it was irrevocable. Just leave it be. This covers the various sections. As I stated earlier, I think it's proven that WotC copies your licensed work. You should be able to force them to take it down/remove it. Again, this is I said the morality clause is the big problem for me. Again, I gave my big feedback at the start. So this is about the virtual tabletop policy. I understand what you're saying, and I feel very low satisfaction towards it. I feel like what's written here is to shut down the market of VTTs that are already um, providing unique options like spell effects, which I think it is true because they're going to come up with their own and they want to be the only one in the market. I have used the OGL 1.0 while working for other creators. And do I want to create it in the future? Maybe. More than likely not. Would you be comfortable? And I basically listed everything I've already said. The fact that WotC D&D can revoke the license at any point. Again, the content of the license can't be revoked, but the license can. And the morality clause, which leaves tons of potential for WotC abuse on the WotC D&D side. I would base my career/income on that license. Again, basically, I don't feel that compared to 1.0a, do you feel that you would be continue developing content the same way under OGL 1.2? No. And then how would the creator badge? I said I'm fine with the creator badge. It's essentially you can put the creator badge on the front cover of your content or include the contents of the OGL within it. They want you to use the creator content badge because it gives them free marketing. I think it's fine. The ampersand on the front cover of your book will probably get you more people to look at it anyway. And then we got this part, right? You can save your answers and come back using a link that will be sent to an email address of your choosing. Please ensure you have received the link. And then they say this email is not saved or associated with your final response. What other feedback do you have for us? I don't have any other feedback for them at this point. Submit. Results of the survey will be made available February 17th. So again, this survey is open till the 3rd of February. We'll see what happens. And then again, on the 17th, we'll be able to analyze those results and hopefully get real, true understanding. I do think calling out like quotes, like if they're like, hey, one of the biggest topics we heard about was the morality clause. And then they pull a quote from somebody talking about the morality clause and say, during that, like they give their speech and they said, here's a couple of things we wanted to highlight. And then in quotes, somebody's thing, they don't obviously have who they're attributing it to, but then they say something along the lines of, this is one of the quotes we received regarding Section 6F. And then they read it verbatim in quotes. That kind of, again, there's room for them to fake that too, but I feel like that is a little more realistic of them showing us actual feedback, showing that they actually have read things and we're actually getting that back and forth. Because, again, people have been saying this to me for years as I've been filling out on our Arcana surveys, is that people thought they weren't using them. That's why they'd shut them down earlier than they said they were going to, because they either got the feedback they were looking for or not. So as long as they're open and clear about what content and what feedback they've received, so we can clearly see what that is, I think that'll be a step in the right direction. Again, they said that it's a draft. I am not even cautiously optimistic. I'm pessimistic about this, but hopefully something good will come from this, and the back and forth will actually get at least some of our demands. But I guess we'll ultimately have to see. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.